Santiago el Apóstol, the patron saint of Spain, was reputedly one of Jesus' apostles and among the first to be martyred. He is also known as Saint James the Greater, Santiago el Mayor, and sometimes Saint James the Moor Slayer, Santiago Matamoros. Many Catholic communities treat Saint James as a local patron saint, including Tonalá in the state of Jalisco, Mexico. Tonalá is a town of moderate size, located a short distance from the state capital, Guadalajara. The locals are known as Tonaltecos, and they commemorate the resistance of their forebears to Spanish conquest. The conquest in Jalisco was particularly brutal. Led by Nuño Beltrán de Guzmán, its strategy was to slaughter and torture the indigenous peoples of Jalisco, called Chichimecas, until they submitted to slavery and Catholicism. These events left indigenous peoples with a highly ambivalent attitude about their colonial history. On one hand, they worship the Catholic pantheon and are grateful that the Spaniards brought their cherished religion. On the other, they feel pride in the courage of their ancestors and resentment at the bloodthirstiness of the conquest and the brutal enslavement of the indigenous peoples, which could not possibly have been less consistent with the values Jesus taught. One of Tonalá's most important holidays is the Festival of St. James, La Fiesta de Santo Santiago, held annually on July 25th and lasting nearly a week. The celebration begins with processions of Tastoanes led around town by an actor representing St. James on horseback and accompanied by a carved image of St. James carried by the Tastoanes. In addition, either 3 kings wearing clay masks or 3 women, one representing the Tonaltec queen Tzapotzintli, also known as Igualpili, and others representing shamans, carry an image of St. James or a crucifix along a parade route and leap and dance to the music of drums and traditional flutes. The masked figures known as Tastoanes represent the indigenous people of Jalisco and follow St. James to a plaza which represents a battlefield. St. James is dressed as a cowboy, a vaquero, and carries a queen's tree branch as a whip. To portray the Tonaltecos, the players wear primitive clothing, strong cowhide masks with fearsome expressions, and carry shields of wood and leather. The masks are thick and heavy to protect the Tastoanes from the whip blows of St. James and are protected in the rear with a thick horsehair or ixtle fiber wig. The ferocious mask has an oversized nose and mouth with tusks and fangs, spots to represent the smallpox brought by the Spaniards, and decorations in the form of spiders, snakes, scorpions, and sometimes the nahual, a mythical spirit half jaguar and half human. The ceremony begins with the shamans purifying the battlefield, and then St. James demands the Tonaltecos convert. The Tastoanes defy the Spanish invaders and proclaim their preference for death to conversion to Catholicism. St. James then rides into battle to traditional music, attacking the Tastoanes with queen's branch whips. Throughout the battle, St. James does not hold back. Soon after the battle begins, the Tastoanes manage to pull St. James from his horse and capture him. They carry him to the center of the plaza and torture and taunt him. Meanwhile, a masquerader dressed as St. James' faithful dog attacks the Tastoanes, driving them away and reviving St. James. St. James then continues his fight on foot, mercilessly whipping the Tastoanes until his whips break. The Tastoanes may taunt and even push St. James when his back is turned, but they never attack, preferring to show their agility in dodging his whip or blocking it with their small shield. Those with exceptional bravado do nothing but endure the blows with disdain. The Wiplos frequently leave welts and gashes in the Tastoanes, who sometimes end the celebration bleeding profusely or even permanently scarred. St. James' dog and sometimes Tastoanes continually supply him with new quince branches to whip his numerous foes. It goes on for nearly an hour, so that there need to be several St. James to battle so many Tastoanes. Ultimately, all the Tastoanes are defeated in the most unchristian manner possible. At the end of a long battle, the Tonaltecos lay dead around St. James, and he celebrates with no trace of irony by proclaiming the victory of Christianity. The Fiesta de Santo Santiago has become so large that it occurs in different parts of town several times each day in the Plaza Mayor and the Cerro de la Reina, Queen's Hill. The number of Tastoanes is so great that they must be organized by Tastoanes Mayores so that they do not gang up and overwhelm St. James. There are separate jugadas or mock battles for small children who do not strike each other nearly as forcefully as the adults and are closely supervised at all times. This gives them the opportunity to learn the tradition in a safe environment. In the past, only males could participate as Tastoanes, but recently, fearless young women have begun to participate. Because the masks and clothes hide their identity, they endure the same whippings and demonstrate the same fortitude as their male counterparts. Tonalá is not the only town in central Mexico to celebrate the festival of St. James with battles of Tastoanes. The town of San Juan de Ocotlán, also in Jalisco, has a well-known jugada, as do some villages in the state of Zacatecas. In each case, the mask looks somewhat different and the sequence of events varies, but they share the theme of courageous indigenous resistance to brutal Spanish subjugation.